for tonight. We'll call for the approval of the minutes here in a minute. Then we have a required state revenue sharing public hearing, which Assistant Finance Director Matt Warner will give you the staff report on. Why does it keep going? It's don't trust the IS people, is what I'm saying. I have some of the questions from the May 8th meeting. I'm going to do it a little differently this year. I didn't have time to put together the whole document of question and answer and hand out at this meeting like I normally would. You will get that. It's just not ready for tonight. But it's going to split into two different ways tonight. First is questions that are not in the presentation, the rest of the presentation. I've got slides on those, and I will go through all those, read the questions, and I'll give you the answers on those. All the other questions I received are intertwined in the presentation. If you did ask me a question and it was not covered in any of that, please feel free to stop me along the way and ask any questions you have. Normally, I know a lot of times we just talk, and then kind of get to questions later. Feel free to interrupt and ask questions as we go along. Then we're going to get into the meat of the meeting and go through and continue our discussion of the 23-24 budget. Then we have required public comment section. I do have one written public comment that I'll pass out and we'll talk about during that section. And hopefully, if you all feel comfortable enough to propose a approval of our 23-24 budget. With that, so that's our agenda tonight. Moving on to you.
All right, we will move on to the approval of the minutes from the May 8th meeting. Did we receive the minutes
They were sent out.
in the email? Okay.
It was attached.
I looked at everything except that. So anyway, are there any questions related to the meetings from the May 8th meeting? To the minutes? No? Okay. Motion to approve? Second? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Right.
Right, I will start the public hearing. Oregon Revised Statutes 221.770 requires 2 public hearings in order to receive apportionment of liquor taxes. The first one tonight is before the Budget Committee on the possible uses of the funds. Second one will be before City Council on June 12th on the proposed use of the funds. The city is estimated to receive $456,315 in fiscal year 23-24. The revenue is not restricted and is used for general city operations. Cigarette taxes, marijuana, gas, and remaining liquor taxes are not covered by this. There is no formal action required by the Budget Committee tonight. Back over to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Do we need to do anything else related to that? What is remaining liquor taxes?
I believe there's 2 types of liquor taxes that we receive. One is
Very algebraic formula. And some of the pieces of it make kind of no sense, but yeah, there's 2 different allocations.
Okay. Any other questions? Nope. All right, thank you. Okay, Dawn. Questions from / since the meeting of May 8th.
And so before I get into that, one of the committee members, actually, Elizabeth Michaels, had a couple of compliments and highlights that she wanted to share, and I didn't get a chance to send this out, so I'm just going to read them to you. On page 4, wonderful, the quality of life survey increased from 84% to 92%. Great reflection on city staff. And pages 128 and 129, these are the library pages. The highlights, goals, and performance measures for the library are one of the reasons why Tualatin is such a great place to live. I recently heard an amazing review of the makerspace from an elementary school student. And your staff. Page 156, very happy to see the goal to coordinate and collaborate with Ridwell to provide additional recycling services. Recycling is one of my issues, and I am thrilled to see my city working on more access to recycling options in our community. Bert's not here tonight, but a call out to Bert Olheiser for all he does. Road paving is one of the things I don't even have to think about because our city roads are in great condition. This is another great benefit to our community. So thank you, Elizabeth, for pointing those out, and I will make sure other staff get those as well that aren't here tonight. So as I said, I'll kind of go over the questions that are not part of the presentations. The first one is so the first two are related to the profile and demographics doc. The first, there are the same numbers on the 22-23 budget. Is this information not available annually? And we updated this about a year ago. It doesn't get updated every year. So we may see that document get updated. We did just update it last year. So the information was in last year's budget and still in this one. There's a reference to Tualatin being home with a crawfish festival. Should this be removed? Yes, it should. So that was one that a couple different people that reviewed that document missed. So we will get that changed out. In the 22-23 proposed budget, the city's 2030 vision page was followed by 3 pages with the priorities for each goal showing completed, ongoing, and upcoming priorities. I'm interested in what changed over the past year. Has this not been formally updated? And the city staff did not go through that same process this year going into that, so we did not have that information. The third question is based upon maintenance services, and in the previous years, it has been part of policy and administration in our budget and is now part of public works. And the question is wondering why change now? And this was an organizational change. A few years back, or a number of years back, we had changing in some staffing. And at that point, it was the public works director left. So we moved maintenance services under Bates Russell with information services. With some changes recently, as it says here, it made more sense for it to be in public works. And so we shifted it under Rachel Sykes and her portfolio. And that's why it happened. So we're just based upon organizational changes at the times, and it made sense. We think it's back in the right place for staff. Can you explain more on what the Leverton Projects Fund is? On page 18, it says it's from the Leverton Tax Increment District. I'm not sure what it is. So it's an urban renewal district. So within our urban renewal agency, our Tualatin Development Division, we have plan areas. One of them was the Leverton Tax Increment District. We also have the Central Urban Renewal District. Those both stopped collecting increment back in 2010. So tax increment financing, as values go up in that area, we have a frozen base, values go up, that increment, those taxes go to the Urban Renewal District. We also get the increment from other entities, other taxing entities. And we use that to build these projects and so forth. The Leverton funds are still left over from when the last time we collected increment. We've been waiting for projects in that plan area because it has to be projects in an identified area. So the Herman Road, the Walton Bell Commission changed the boundaries a few years back to include this section here, the widening of Herman Road to our east here to just get ready to happen, and that will pick up use of the funds. Also, do most cities have urban renewal agencies? There are 88 cities in the state that have an urban renewal agency. It's not every city. It's dependent upon the needs. We have created one down in the Salt Creek area. Obviously, that's a lot of just open area. We're going to need to provide infrastructure to bring in development. And so the urban renewal district we set up there, within those boundaries, will bring in those monies so we can build the infrastructure. They have to decide certain areas to focus on each year. So the plan area is defined when the urban renewal district is set up. In that area, it's defined boundaries, and then you determine what you're going to spend in those areas in that year. But boundaries don't change. If you change a boundary, it's a whole big process to do so. In reference to Basalt Creek, the budget message states there are funds budgeted to complete the master plan for stormwater in that area. Where can these funds be found, and when will that be completed? The monies for that part of the master plan, stormwater for the Basalt Creek area, is located in the Stormwater Development Fund in the capital outlay section. And the plan is, because of staffing and engineering, it had to be put aside a little bit. We were down, of course, they had a lot of other things going on. plan is to pick it back up in the upcoming fiscal year. There are ARPA funds budgeted for expenditures in 23-24 and the remaining balance. When do these funds need to be allocated and used? Under ARPA, funds have to be obligated by December 31st, 2024, and the cash has to actually be out the door spent by the end of 2026, December 31st, 2026. So we have to make sure we obligate these funds by that time. Now, you may have heard in the debt ceiling negotiations, and there is a clawback. My understanding is there is a clawback of ARPA funds. There was a lot of concern that that clawback would include our state and local funding. It doesn't. That's the easy answer. Because Treasury, under that program and the legal levels in the ARPA law, the legal level of obligation is at the U.S. Treasury level. U.S. Treasury, when they sent the monies out, that became obligated funds. Also, the dates, that 2024 and 2026 date, are in the statute of the ARPA law. Therefore, they would actually have to change the law to have been able to claw back those funds. So, we're safe under that. Funds have been obligated at the proper authority level. Those funds will not be clawed back under what you've heard of debt ceiling and negotiations. And we will have all our funds obligated by the end of 2024 and actually spent at the end of 2024. Are there plans to use some of the $10.25 million contingency in the Transportation Development Tax Fund? This will be used on future capital projects that are eligible to be funded under the Transportation Development Tax. It's going to be on a list as a whole process for that. The projects will be chosen as part of the Transportation System Plan update, the process of identifying projects. And that plan update will then identify if there's any eligible to use those funds. In the information services budget, repair and maintenance computers, there's a $429,400 budget in there. What does that go towards? Citywide, we have a multitude of software packages that we use for a lot of different things. What goes in this line is the annual maintenance for all the software that we use around the city. That's what makes up that amount of money in that line. What will the proposed just over $1 million for equipment and furnishings be used for this is in the vehicle replacement fund. Here's the list. I'll just read a couple of the items. So there's some like parks maintenance vehicles, there's police vehicles in there, there's utility vehicles, hook truck, trailers. There's an electric vehicle that's going to replace for engineering. That's in the budget this upcoming year. And that's the categories they are all in. The utility van and facility. So across a multitude of our areas across the city, with some of the vehicles that are part of the replacement schedule that need to be replaced, funded out of that. The increase in participants from 1,500 in 2022, 2023 to 4,000 in 23-24 reasonable with no additional FTEs. This is related to our parks and recreation area. What is the plan to accommodate so many more participants without additional staff capacity? Okay, Ross, I saw you here somewhere. There you are. You and I talked about this earlier, so type in if there's any pieces that I missed. 1,500 participants was a pandemic year number. Prior to that, we were having over 3,000 participants. So the 1,500 is a low number due to the pandemic. We've come out of that part in our recreation programs. The plan is to have, our goal is 4,000 participants. If you go to the expenditure side and the temporary staffing in the Parks and Rec budget, during the pandemic, we did not lower that staffing number. The actual dollars were significantly less because we utilized temporary staff for all those programs. So while the numbers were low, the budget stayed high. So you'll see the budget continuing to grow for cost of living increases. And we had some increases in the temporary service line, temporary employee line, based upon that we were going to increase some of our recreation offerings. So the budget has been increased over the years. The numbers will correspond to what the budget is. Did I hit that? Anything else? Next. What are societal crimes? The easiest way to answer this is to actually turn it over to Chief Pickering to give a better answer. He gave me a list, but I think it's best to come from him.
Societal crimes are those victimless crimes. Sort of prostitution, those that be categorized not having a human victim or piece of property.
There's $431,000 of maintenance services for R&M major projects. What are those, what's involved in there? There's an HVAC replacement at the police, library, city offices, and fleet building. Those are the biggest dollars in that, and there's a couple other smaller projects that are within that budget. Seems like the city is on the edge of needing to add staff with the new housing and parks development. There's a long-range forecast, consider new positions when additional tax revenue comes in. Simple answer is, as a lot of that development is happening there, that is within our urban renewal district. So we have foregone the general fund revenues for that, as well as taxing, with other taxing entities, TBF&R, county, school district, and so forth, are also foregoing those taxes. We had to build in that area, which will then, when it comes back on the rolls in about 20 years, we will see a significant increase in our assessed value. So we will have to manage those needs as things come up within our normal budget. And there are some developments that would be outside of that add to our assessed value and our general fund revenues. We will also look at, in some of those areas, when we have a shorter term need, sometimes in the building, we have some consultant dollars in the building, and it's kind of reads into the next part is consultants. If we have that big spike in a short time period, we may hire out to help us get through that time period. Or we'll look at, I mean, there's a number of ways we can do that. But we are, the long-term financial plan has some growth in personal services, but not potentially what we're looking at. Some of those, as some of this other stuff comes in, it'll be a little bit further down the road. We'll manage within our budget. So the other part of that question is, why do certain departments have a line item for consultant while others do not? It's based upon need and what we think we're going to need to go out, hire a consultant for. So in example of engineering, there may be particular projects that we may need to bring in a traffic consultant or other types of consultants where it's project-based. And so there are some departments that have that more so than others. In finance, we've got a small amount of consultant dollars for things that come up, just a small amount. We use it. We've been using it the last few years, but they're usually don't. It's dependent on projects and need. This is a longer one, and it's referencing the entities around us, particularly the city of Beaverton and Washington County, that have had some significant, probably read and heard about. Those are the two largest entities in our area that are having significant budget issues that have had made some big cuts. Beaverton did just approve their budget early last week. They had about a $10 million general fund hole they had to fill. They are not filling some positions. They are making some layoffs or closing their library, one of the branches of the library 3 days a week. Is there anything regionally, statewide, or nationally that can impact us and put our reserves at risk? I would say nothing that I think of or that I've seen. There's nothing I'm worried about. Those areas that would impact us, we are strong in our reserves. We are structurally, we have a strong structure to our budget and to our financial position. I think what you saw in some of these other entities was their structure wasn't as strong. And some of the things are just like realizing now, like, oh my gosh, we're now hitting that wall, we have to react. We've been very cognizant of that future and make sure our structure is in place so that we don't hit that wall. Try to continue putting we make decisions of adding any kind of ongoing expenditure, that we've got the ongoing to cover it. Anticipate that will happen. Miss anything on that? Questions on that? I know it's kind of a long and a piece that there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle.
I'm just curious in terms of as hypothetically hitting that wall, is there any long-term, because we do a yearly budget, right? We look at the next year, next fiscal year, or this coming fiscal year. Do you guys forecast for 10 plus years in the future for specific divisions or departments or anything like that?
We look at a couple of years, but we are very careful that before we add any kind of expenditure. So we don't just look at, when a department wants to add something, we don't just look at, can we do it this year? It's, do we have the ongoing capability to continue that? Any kind of an ongoing. So we are constantly, that's part of our dialogue. That's part of our language, so to speak. That's how we go about it. And we do look at how that's going to.
Our fiscal health model, we go out 5 years.
I usually show about 3 years. Once you start getting out beyond that,
Yeah,
your
yeah.
assumptions are, the assumptions are only good as the next month almost. So, yeah, but we do go out a couple years. That's part of the dialogue. Will the police be increasing their budget for the impacts of House Bill 3115, sometimes commonly referred to as time, place, manner, ordinance? There's a lot of other ways people talk about it. So the council is going to have discussed the impacts of HB 3115 in their June 12th work session. There are no proposed staffing changes as part at this time due to any of those dialogues, but the staff will be giving council updates and talk about what that ordinance might look like. Council will start that discussion.
For those of you that are unfamiliar with that, that's the requirement to, we can no longer ban camping associated with our neighbors that are experiencing houselessness. So we can't say you can't camp, but we can set up time regulations when camping can occur. We can set up places where they can camp or places where they can't camp. And we can set up manner, so like can't build a structure, or you can't dig a hole, or you can't build a fire, those kind of things. So we're required under state law, it was House Bill 3115, that required us to go back and look at our ordinance where we banned all camping. And so to come into compliance with that House bill, we have to relook at that and add time, place, manner regulations. And so the council will be looking at that on June 12th and June 26th, because it needs to be in effect by July 1st.
So this can speak to our overall budget strategy in regards to contingency and reserves. And it mentions in here that if you look at our total expenditures, they do exceed our total revenue. So as I mentioned before, we look at our ongoing picture. So what you see in these numbers is not split out ongoing versus one time. This is just total budget as a whole. There are a number of items in here that are one-time expenditures. Especially like right now, we have the Parks Bond Fund that's been added. So there's a large number of projects in there that are one. So you will always see, if you look at the numbers here, that total expenditures will generally exceed total revenues, because we build up contingencies and reserves to use for one-time expenditures in the future. And so that's, our strategy is to be using one-time dollars for those one-time expenditures. That's why you'll see the continuing reserve build and then see them drop depending on the funding happening. But it is our strategy to make sure that we are able to handle our ongoing expenditures with our ongoing revenues, and then those the difference. Yeah, so contingencies are for items that come up during the year that you could anticipate. So you set aside contingency. At the end of the year, it all wraps up in the same ball. But we separate out during the budget process, amount of contingency, and our contingency policy for most of our funds is 15% total appropriation. That amount is set in policy. And the reason for that 15% is under local budget law, we can go to the council and ask for a simple resolution out of contingency up to a cumulative amount of 15%. So that's how we set that. Reserves are generally meant for future years, but we can tap into those. There is one line, general fund has an item called unappropriated fund balance, and that's the only fund that has it, and that cannot be touched, except for basically a natural disaster. It's not the only time you touch that in a year. It is meant for future purposes. Any other questions? That's the ones that I got that are not part of the presentation.
Did you mention that you're gonna send that?
I will, yeah, well, put together as a complete document with the questions and the answers.
Another question. So, this, but did I hear, was it my imagination in the last meeting that there's going to be, somebody's gonna redo the city?
That is,
That's not a line item?
we will talk about, that is part of the presentation tonight. There is a portion of a line in our general fund non-departmental that we will start the redesign of the website in this upcoming. Not that I can think of that would impact our fund. There are some bills out there that have city impacts, but I can't think of anything. Nothing yet. Actually, nothing in our budget that we've counted on passage of a bill in this session. Doesn't happen. Any other questions? Okay, well, let's go into the meat and potatoes of the meeting tonight. We'll continue our review. So just as a reminder, these are the funds that we discussed last meeting. Again, like I mentioned then, if there's any questions you have as you've done the review on these funds, feel free to ask them. Just not going to have any of these funds on our presentation. So what we will go over is we will start with the general fund, and these are the different programs. We call them cost centers in our general fund. See them listed there. I'm not going to read through those. You're going to hear me talk enough tonight. You don't need me to read everything on every slide. We will then move on to these funds, our building fund, our road funds, our parks, project funds, some of our transportation, our bond fund there, and then we'll get into utility funds. Here's the pages that there are. When I go through the presentation, I talk about a particular item. I've got on the slide the page number that I'm referring to. I'll try to slow down when we get through those in case you want to flip to those pages. In most slides, I've shown a portion of that page that I'm talking that has those line items on it. So if I'm going too fast or you need time to catch up to something, please just stop me. So before I get into that, there are some common themes that are interwoven throughout many budgets in the overall budget. The first one is personnel services, and that you'll find in all the general fund, pretty much all the general fund centers. We also have personal services in building, in water, sewer, and in road operating. So these types of items impact all those funds. So in our salary lines, you'll see increases in those, and those increases are basically, for the most part, based upon our association contracts. We have the Walton Police Officers Association, and we have a contract with them, so COLAs are contractual in the police officers in the police budget. And then most of the rest of our employees that are non-management are represented by AFSCME, and we have a contract with them as well. And a COLA that's contractual. The non-management, the non-represented, were in this upcoming year with budget is to follow the same COLA that we asked. 4% built in the budget.
COLA is cost of living.
Yes, so if I hit an acronym, and I'll try not to use an acronym, if I hit one and your eyes are kind of spinning, please stop me. I've tried as I've gone through some of this not to use acronyms. Oregon Public Employees Retirement System, Oregon PERS, that's wrapped in. We are under the first year of biennial PERS rates. Our PERS rates went up on the percent. We pay a percentage as a contribution rate of salary. The increases that we saw for this next biennium, we saw anywhere from 1.16% to 1.73% of salary, which is significantly lower than we had been projecting in past years. They had some really good years of interest in earnings that went into the funding of the system, and we didn't have to contribute as much. After this next biennium, those higher percentage, but we saw some significant savings what we were expecting the first system. City County Insurance Services is where we get our health and dental benefits. And so you'll see health and dental lines increase throughout the budget. We saw some pretty good rate increases. So when I say good, they were lower than anticipated. CIS is a statewide pool. And so we get to use the bargain or the buying power of many employees across the state to get good rates on our premiums. So you'll see increases there, but they are not as high as it could have been. Yes, but. Oh, I know it is. Sometimes so that line goes up and down. It's not only the percentage increase in health and dental benefits, but if we have an employee who leaves and they may have full coverage, and we hire someone coming in that just has single party coverage is significantly less cost. So that budget, you may see that line item go down. Flip side of that is we could have an employee leave who is on a single party coverage at a lower premium, and we hire someone that's got full family or coverage. So those don't go up and down just based upon the percentage increases. Some other taxes, that we get taken out that we are responsible for. The bottom there is our FICA and Medicare. So we pay 7.65%. The employee also pays 7.5% of the check. TriMet, there's a TriMet payroll tax, which is 0.8037% of wages. And so we pay that, all our wages. And then SAFE is our workers' comp carrier. And so we pay workers' comp coverage for all our employees. And last is a new one this year, Paid Leave Oregon. So there's 1% of salary that is deducted. The city pays 0.4% of salary. The employee pays the other 0.6%. So that's now, I meant to pull the numbers together. It was about $60,000 hit to our budget for the city side when Paid Leave Oregon. Some areas that we won't go over line items here again is our personal computer, laptop, and information system services. So you will see a significant decrease, and this is on a replacement schedule. Bates and his staff figure out have a schedule, what laptops and computers need to be replaced across the city. This is going down because we have to replace all the mobile data terminals in the police department and the police cars. That's actually happening this year. And part of the way to pay for that is because we won't have to replace as many computers next year. And Bates and staff looked at our computers we have and decided to reduce this line, help pay for the over $100,000. But in small tools and public works, vehicle replacement, I talked about the vehicles that are funded there. Those are all based on replacement schedules and it's programmed in. So every year you'll see an up and down in some of those lines based upon what we need to replace in that year. Software annual maintenance, I talked about that, question and answer period. So the transfers in the utility operating funds. Transfers are kind of I got a couple slides here on transfers because the ins and outs can be a little confusing, things that are. So we have transfers that come into the general fund that are for operating expenditures of things that are funded in the general fund. For example, finance staff. All departments, we pay bills for people, we pay payroll. If you've got the water fund, if the water fund were on its own business, which is treated like, they would have to have a payroll person, they would have to have a finance. So we allocate out to those funds the portion of positions that are paid for in the general fund. Those funds pay it back in an allocation method. So you'll see a lot of transfers in the general fund, transfers in and transfers out to the general fund intermixed through. In addition to those types of transfers, we have these transfers into our utility funds. I'm going to try to explain this in a very simplistic way, and hopefully this makes sense. When we have a project, say a water project, $1 million, and it's 50%, well, let's go 60% eligible to be used system development charges, SDCs. So $600,000 is SDC eligible. So the SDC or the development fund is going to pay that $600,000. Water operating fund would pay the other $400,000. We made a decision a few years back to put the whole $1 million project cost in down. So when you want to know how much did that water line cost, you go to the water operating fund, you see $1 million. 600,000 then is a transfer from the development fund into the operating fund, so that we can also say, we can look at our development fund, that's just SDCs, and we have to report on those, restricted. So we can say, there's $600,000 that was paid for this project at SDCs. Here it is, it's a transfer into the operating. So try to keep the SDC funds clean, have the whole expenditures in one place. So you'll see some of those transfers out in the development funds, transfers in then funds from those development funds. In utility rate revenues, I'm not going to talk really on the revenue side and the water, the sewer, the stormwater, the road utility, and the parks utility. These are all part of the utility bill. But you'll see the revenues that are increasing in all those funds based upon rate increases. Speaking of rate increases, the proposed rates for the upcoming year, the water, most of these are based upon our master plan. Water master plan is being adopted right now. So there is a 12% increase in the water rates based upon the needs of our water system and the projects that are coming. Sewer is split. I think I mentioned this before. There's a portion that is a regional rate set by Clean Water Services. There's a local rate that the city sets. The city sewer side is a 9% increase, again, based upon our master plan projects that we need in the future, in the near future. Clean Water Services is passing along a 4% rate increase on the sewer and also on their stormwater side. The city side of the stormwater is a 3%. The road maintenance, a few years back, we indexed the road utility fee, and it's a three-prong indexing that the county develops for the transportation element tax. And then that's the same indexing that we have in the road utility side. And that for this year is a 6.01% increase. And the park utility fee, we have not increased that. It's a $5 flat fee for every account in there. And so there's no rate increase built in this year. So you'll see that these rate increases will have the impact to an average residential home of about $8 a month. And these rates will be up in front of the council in June. I think it's the 26th. I'll take that resolution. Capital projects in the budget, there's a few pages back in the CIP section. So you can turn to page 209 and page 210 if you want to read all those. I'm not going to go through, but I'm also was planning on talking about the different projects in each one as I go through it. There's the list here. If you have any questions, go along on any of these projects. You couldn't read all that, Mayor? No. So what's the third one down in the transportation? So the Tualatin River Greenway Trail Extension, I bring this up is because it's in revenues and it's in expenditures. So this is the extension of the trail under 99W the work has started and will continue into next year. The revenue is coming from two different sources. We got a state grant, and so on the general fund revenue, you'll see the state grant money. We've spent some of it in the current fiscal year. The rest will be received next year. And then the county's Major Streets Transportation Improvement Program, or MISTIP, is, we got a commitment of $300,000 from the county for that project. Now, one of the questions that I had proposed to me was with the county's financial situation, and they're, I guess, clawing back some of the MISTIP funding, does that impact our project and the funding there? And the simple answer to that is no. We have a contract, an IGA with the county. We've got a written commitment on it, and I have not heard anything that they're going to go against that commitment. Things in that where they couldn't do it, get back. So no, it doesn't impact it. Still get that funding. And then the actual project cost is in the Parks and Recreation budget and fund. Project. So just a reminder on the sewer and stormwater rates. This was the change of accounting. So that you'll see this on the different revenue areas. Where the Clean Water Services share, because it's just a pass-through, we are no longer considering it revenue, and we're no longer putting it into our budget. On the expenditure side, it's just going to go into what's called a liability account, and put it in there when we collect it, pay it out of there. And so you see now where there were, in the Clean Water Services side, there were dollar amounts before. We're not showing that revenue longer. So collecting bills for them, but it's just going outside of revenue. That's happening in the sewer and stormwater side. And then you'll see this is the expenditure side where we would pay it out to clean water before we zero the line. One more transfers in the utility funds. We do not, so there's two components here. We do not fund personnel in the stormwater operating fund. But they do get services of the staffing, which is in the road operating fund and the sewer operating fund. So Bert Olheiser's crew is street, sewer, and storm crew. They do things in all those areas. We just budget their time either in the road operating sewer fund, but they provide services to stormwater. So on an allocation basis, we transfer monies for personnel costs from stormwater operating into those two. The other transfer you see goes into road operating, and that's in our road utility fund. There's an allocation there as well because of the road crews that are budgeted in road operating through the road utility program. So there's an allocation there as well for road utility transfers into road operating personnel costs as well. The last transfer I think I'll talk about tonight, I don't think I got any other transfers in the presentation. The two counties have a vehicle license fee that they charge. We get a share of the Washington County vehicle license fee and the Clackamas County vehicle license fee. Council made the decision a few years back, we really want to put that to our pavement maintenance. Again, we keep the road utility fund clean so that the revenues in there are just for the road utility bill payments. So we collect those revenues from the counties in the road operating fund, and then they get transferred out into the utility fund. Use everybody enough yet on transfers? Let's go good. I did my job there. Another thing you'll see across all budgets or all funds is interest revenue. And as I mentioned before, we are seeing interest rates significantly increase. We just last week on the Parks bond, so I'm giving you more money. We have an investment short-term investment that we were able to earn just over 5% on that. So we took some of our monies that were in the state pool, that are earning less than that, moved it into this investment until September. So for the next couple of months, we'll be earning 5% on a good chunk idle funds. But everywhere else, you're seeing significant increases in the interest revenue because of the interest rate environment we're in. The only ones I don't think there's any decreases, but if you did, it's just based upon like the transportation bond, we're spending down those balances, not as much idle funds to invest. But I don't think that there's a reduction there, but that's a possible point. But all the rest, you should be seeing increases. Reserves and contingencies. So thanks, Alyssa, for the question on what's a reserve, what's a contingency. In your budget document, you see this net change in fund balance. And I just kind of wanted to explain that table a little bit. So the beginning fund balance is the amount in all funds that we estimate we're going to start the year. What's our fund balance? We're going to start the year with. Changes in fund balance column here is any revenues we're bringing into the fund and then what we're spending out of the fund. So the net there then ends up being our ending fund balance. So it's basically beginning plus revenues minus expenditures equals ending. The changes in fund balance, these ones you see negative, are that question I answered before about we're using one-time dollars. Or if it was an ongoing general fund, we're anticipating a little bit of an ongoing gap, but we anticipate that we have the one-time revenues or the ongoing revenues for that thing out there on 12th and Sherwood Road I talked about that you're all supposed to forget about. The reduction of revenue there will. So the general fund, that's part of that $1 million. But the rest of that is capital. So that's kind of how that chart worked if you were reading that at the beginning. So now let's move on to the general fund. Again, I think the main part of the revenue side that I want to stress is we are stable. We're still seeing stability in our revenue sources. You see it on the chart there that most everything is going up. Ones that are going down were very minor ones, the fines and forfeitures I talked about. Everything else for the most part is going up. Intergovernmental revenues is coming down a little bit, but those are one-time grants and so forth that we got in 22, 23 that we're no longer receiving 24. But overall, we're very happy that we have a very stable revenue. Franchise fees, I did have a question about franchise fees, what they are, and then what makes them up. So in our right of way, so in our streets, in the section between the sidewalk and the street, that's public right of way as well. Telecommunications companies, they have their wires running through our right of way. We have our water and sewer lines, but we also have natural gas lines are running our right of way. PGE's got their lines that are running. So we're not just going to let them use that for free. We charge them a franchise fee, and we have franchise agreements with both all our major utilities. So PGE, Northwest Natural, they've actually gone to this right-of-way fee structure. And I'll talk about that in just a second. Republic Services, our garbage hauler, we have a franchise agreement with them that they pay us for the use of our system. And telecommunications go through MAC, or the Metropolitan Area Communications Commission. So all our telecommunications actually go through MAC, and then they send them on to us in our allocation share. And if you've seen in the revenue items, our PC operations grants, that's actually the portion of franchise fees granted out by MAC. And Bates and his staff have done a great job of getting grants for some of our infrastructure, our IS infrastructure from MAC. But those go in there. We're seeing some increases there. PGE came in higher this current year than we'd anticipated. And so we think that's going to continue. As they're based upon, it's a percentage of gross revenues of the company. So as any of these companies have rate increases, we anticipate then that the franchise fee will go up because their gross revenues are increasing, and we're getting a larger share of that. The right-of-way fees, we created a right-of-way ordinance a few years back. And it's similar to a franchise fee. It's for use of the right of way. We have some of these smaller companies that we don't have a franchise with. We are now capturing them if they're using our right of way under the right of way ordinance. So we're now starting to see revenue. We're seeing revenue there, and our staff in public works that oversee franchises have done a really good job of identifying who those companies are to make sure they're paying franchise fees, paying for the use of our right of way, or they were using it and not paying it. Northwest Natural has actually shifted from a actual franchise, and they're operating under our right of way. Most everything is happening underground, but
Yeah.
so it's like a small telecommunications company, maybe using the lines of others or in conduit that's underground. So it's identifying the staff's done a great job of identifying who those people are using it. PG, they've got their poles in a lot of places over Brent said the poles are typically right away. The lines are running through the city, truck their pay. The intergovernmental revenue, so you'll see a significant increase in the marijuana taxes. There's two components to this, and I can't give you the exact breakdown of this for a few different reasons, but we have seen some increases in our state tax. The way that formula is, so we started seeing a little bit there, but we also have a dispensary in town that we are receiving we have a 3% local marijuana tax. So we're starting to see collections in there, and that's all in this line item as well. I can't give a breakdown because I have to sign a confidentiality agreement with the state because of if I give you the dollar amounts, you could back into their gross revenues potentially. That's not allowed. So it's all intertwined there. We're seeing an increase for those two reasons. Again, the PCN operations grant, that increase we're seeing because of the anticipating a $10,000 grant this year to help pay for some of our what's called net motion licensing for our laptops to get into our network. We have a system software that's called NetMotion that we utilize to do that. So we're getting a grant back to pay for a few 5 years, 5 to 6 years for that. So that's a less cost that it's going to have on the general fund. And then the last one there is our transient lodging tax. We are seeing an increase in travel. We've started seeing it, as you can tell, in actual 21, 22, people started traveling again. We started seeing months of travel costs, travel revenue that exceeded pre-pandemic. So people started traveling, and they pay a percentage of their bill. I'm sure when you go to a hotel, you see the transit lodging tax you pay. We have a countywide tax that we get a share of, and then we have a local tax, a city tax as well. And so we'll be back up to collecting about $600,000 between the two, the county allocation and the city. It's the same percentage. So we've got about $300,000 from the county's share, $300,000 on our tax or our local tax. I came across an article recently. Saw it online. Oregon's tourism economy reaches new heights in 2022. Travel Oregon says. And I want to say they were saying there was going up. So Travel Oregon found local governments collected $45 million in travel activity taxes in 2022, an increase of 21.2%. When I would get those monthly reports from the county collects it for us. I couldn't believe that, yeah, our months were exceeding pre-pandemic.
And we've worked with our, we know that our local hotels are primarily business travel. And so, as opposed to like a visitor, like there are some that are going to like wine country or traveling up and down I-5. However, most of it is business travel. So that's great news for our local businesses that they're back up bringing consultants in and folks associated with our local business.
Washington County Cooperative Library System. WCCLS, or WICKLS, so it's pretty named as, different name. Because of the county situation, we typically receive a 3% increase in our allocation, our allotment of the library funding. We get a big chunk, over $1 million. We're only going to see a 1% increase in this rate. Better than it being reduced, better than it being 0. Hoping for 3, we're hoping for 2. If nothing, we're going to get 1, still an increase. Mary Ann and her staff still do an outstanding job with their budgets. There are no changes in our library budget this year, no reductions based upon this. The revenue side, we're going to bring in less revenue. And then you see the other grant revenue, there was 97,000 in actual 2021, nothing after that. That was CARES Act funding that we received at the beginning of the pandemic. That makes up that amount. Street trees, there's a correlation. So you'll see it on the revenues on page 67. The expenditure side is in parks maintenance budget on 140. For the street trees, I came across this diagram that our Parks and Rec together, identifying what's the street. Basically, it's in that planter strip between the sidewalk and the street. It's city right away. The homeowner's responsibility for those trees and that maintenance, it is city right of way. So if someone wants to take that tree out, they have to come in and get a permit to remove it from the city. They're going to replace it. They get the permit. So the revenue side is on there is to cover our costs for replacing the tree if we plant the tree. So we want to make sure our costs are included in there. And then the expenditure side of the street trees, all the costs that go into it. It's our cost of the trees, it's the materials. But you'll see at the revenue side, it's higher than the expenditure side because we also cover our personnel costs for our staff to go out and replace that tree. That's what the revenue side is, and the corresponding expenditure in the park maintenance. And the staff estimates how many street trees they're going to use plant in a year. And so the revenues are the same amount. So if it's 10 trees, the revenue is based upon 10 trees, and the per tree amount expenditure side is for 10 trees to replace materials. They do. So that's the permit. They pay for the cost of the tree and so forth.
Not the installation.
So that the per tree amount covers our cost to install the tree itself and any other cost part of it.
It's an optional expense, so when you apply for the permit, there is a permit fee, but then it's optional to have the city manage the replacement and removal on. Most homeowners choose to have the city, so they pay that.
Authorized list, correct? I'm explaining very well that.
Nice. This is the city ordinance.
Did an outstanding job sort of getting things cleaned up. Much better than a lot of entities around us, which is a common theme here, Kevin. There's a lot of things we do much better than our entities around us. And we'll be more than happy to tell you. All right, so now let's get into the expenditure side. And these are the pages that I'm going to go in order in the document. But there are 5 areas that I didn't find any significant changes to talk about. If you have something that you noticed in there, please ask. I didn't see anything that. So when I go through the document and prepare for the presentation, I try to find significant changes in a line item that I would want to know, why did it go up? Why did it go down? Why is it changing? Some slight increases, decreases. may look at a line item and go, there's not really a story here. No, but please, if there's something in any of these budgets that I'm not highlighting and you have a question on, please stop and ask. But the five that I don't have a slide on, and we'll talk about it individually, are the city council budget, the administration budget, legal, community development. Doesn't mean they're not doing a lot of great things. Doesn't mean that they're not, having some expenditures they don't need this next year, but they've got other items in there that they're doing. But if you look at the bottom lines, there's not a lot of change, line item by line item. Let's talk about the actual differences. Yeah, so you will see, if you were to look at all the budgets, especially on the conference and meeting side, all the budgets that have those line items, the actual dollars will be significantly less than the last few years. We're seeing in-person meetings.
Yeah.
And if some entities I belong to had conferences, but they were all online, well, obviously there's no cost for me to go there.
Yeah.
And typically then the amount for the conference was less. So the first one we'll talk about is my budget, or math. I just say, oh, that looks good. There are a couple areas here that are significant. One is we are under a new audit contract. We just awarded to a firm called Singer Lewack. If any of you know much about the government or the government auditors, they used to be Holt, Carlisle, and Smith. And Singer Lewack is the parent company that purchased them. So we just signed a new audit contract. Audit. We also have what budgeted in here was called a single audit. We get more than $750,000 of federal grant money cumulatively, then we have to have an additional what's called a single audit. It's a more involved audit of our grant funding. So we budget for that because every year we're not quite sure necessarily going in if we're going to have that amount. Sometimes we're right close to it. With the ARPA money, it's been ruled that if that's what gets you over the 750, you don't have to have a full single audit. You have what's called an examination for a lesser cost. I think that's what potentially in the next year or so can happen. But we're also applying for a $15 million grant for EV charging stations, electric vehicle charging stations. Start charging me $1 for every acronym. And so if we get that, obviously those expenditures will be, but those costs are in here. The conference and meetings, there's an increase there. Recently appointed to the National League of Cities Finance Administration Intergovernmental Relations Committee. So there's 3 meetings a year, 2 that traveling to. So I added money added in my budget to cover my costs of travel within the committee. And then you'll see a reduction in the economic development expense and advertising informational. These line items were placeholders a few years back when we didn't know what might happen coming out of the pandemic. If we're going to need the non-grant money that might go towards an economic development expense or other types of items. Well, we've had other funding for things that have happened. We've been able to do. We just don't see that need for that anymore, so we've not. We have monies available if we, especially grant monies for some of these items, if it's come up or making that happen. The municipal court, there are 2 line items, and these both are based upon court costs. There's 2 items. One, the municipal court judge has not had he's had some COLA increases, but we have not changed his rate since we started 14 years ago. Sherwood, he is also the judge at Sherwood. They just recently went through a full analysis of salary there too, and so to keep him competitive in the market, determine if we really needed to raise our hourly fee for him. So that's included in that line item. The court cost line, that's what we pay our interpreter. So we have a Spanish-speaking interpreter at every court. And if we get requests from someone else to speak a different language, then we'll work to get an interpreter with the court. So the interpreter costs come out of that line item. We're seeing an increase in the cost. Information services, you'll see that the decrease in the computer equipment and software, the 91,000 in the current year was included some one-time items of Microsoft server licenses we're having to redo. Current fiscal year, that's not going to happen in 23, 24. And then the printers that the police officers have in the police cars, we need to replace those. Those were replaced in 23, 20. So therefore, won't be replaced in 24. Placed in 22, 23, not to be done in 23, 24. So that's why that line item is going down. On the consultants side, there's two components here that we're funding as a one-time expenditures this next year. Some audiovisual system support for $1,500. And then we know that, like anything else, there's a lot of software that is, in the next few years, we're going to be required to go to their cloud. We do a lot of our on-premise, my financial systems on-premise, our budget software is an on-premise solution. A few years down the road, at some point, they're going to require us to go to their cloud version. So where IS is going to hire a consultant to help look at our infrastructure, help us come up with a plan that as these different things are going to the cloud, what do we need to do with our systems to be able to handle it? So there's $10,000 in the budget this next year for that. Well, there's 15,000. Try to take 5,000 away. Okay. So moving on to page 109 of the general fund non-departmental, I've got a number of different items that we'll talk about here. So the consultants, there's an overall decrease. If you look at that line item, there's an overall decrease, but there's a lot of things happening. There are, in some areas, a decrease and then a subsequent increase in some line items. But in some of these areas, you're seeing decrease larger than community action for the climate action plan. We are winding down the plan part of it, going into implementation. So that we have a higher amount of cost in the current year to develop the plan. Implementation will be significantly less. So that's the biggest part of this decrease in this line item. With the transportation bond projects winding down, we have less cost of a marketing consultant that we've had on since that project started. So we're seeing reduction in the 12th to move forward line item or portion of fund. The diversity, equity, and inclusion, we had a consultant that we've been working with the last year, 2 years on an internal process that we're done with. But we are putting some money aside for the new Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, Access Committee, Advisory Committee. So we've got a consultant. It's less than what we were paying for a consultant, but we do have some consultant hours in the budget that help us get that process, in that committee going. Mentioned the website redesign. That is in this line item. And we are starting that process. So in speaking with Megan, she identified how much she thought would be spent in 23, 24. It won't be completed in 23, 24, but the beginning part of that project is budgeted here for the upcoming year. Also included in this is I mentioned this last meeting, a lobbyist. We have money built in the budget in this line item for a contract lobbyist to help us keep an eye and lobby on our behalf, the local, state, federal impacts of different bills or different activities going on in Salem and in Washington, but also looking at funding opportunities for us. Good state and federal funding opportunities that there's a lot of money that floats around that it's hard for us to continually track on an ongoing basis. These lobbyists have more of a pipeline in, and we're anticipating that we'll be able to see some additional revenues in the future by utilizing that. So in the community engagement line, so what was budgeted this year is community action for the climate action plan, the community climate action plan. We had some community engagement budgeted as part of the plan development. The implementation part of the community engagement is actually in that community, in that consultant line. So we won't be utilizing in the community engagement line. We are gonna carry over some amount of that because we're still gonna 2024. The other side of this is the community survey. When will that be completed, Megan? Okay. So that is budgeted, community survey, which we do every 4 years, 3 years. That is programmed in, we did it this year, so therefore we don't have it budgeted the upcoming year. That's why you see the decrease. In the advertising and promotional, the decrease here is, we had a professional photographer that we've been hiring that's taken a lot of wonderful pictures. Because we have a lot of these, we don't need to have as many pictures, so the contract for that position or for that contract has been reduced in the upcoming year. We also had graphic design needs that were budgeted in the current year, and again, we reduced that as well. What we need to have an outside graphic design person do has been reduced. The redesign of the e-newsletter was also included in 22, 23. Now that's what we have that money. The next one, we'll jump to page 130 and the library. A lot of wonderful things happening in the library. You don't see a lot of changes in the budget. We continue to just do great things with the money that they are allotted. You see some reductions in these two lines, the printing and postage and the consultant lines. Current fiscal year, the library went through a marketing plan and hired a consultant and then had some advertising costs for that. That is completed. Now you're going through the implementation stage of that, correct? So a lot of wonderful things coming out of that as well, on top of what the library provides. And I know there was a comment, it was one of the comments Elizabeth made about the library and how positive comments we get. So I'm just not calling out the library. All our departments do a lot of great things, but the library is one of those very visual, very just public facing that you hear a lot about, but we also hear a lot of comments about our roads, other public works services. No one calls and says wonderful things about finance. Matt, what's going on over there? So these two line items in the library, these are both on replacement schedules. So this is one of those line items you'll see up and down throughout the year based upon what computer equipment, what public technology needs to be replaced. I think the one big piece that I identified looking at the library budget is the replacement of the 3D. That's going to happen next year. That's a very popular printer. That's now solely in the makerspace. And I know that gets used frequently, so we're going to be replacing that next year. On to Parks and Rec. So again, a lot of wonderful things. This is also another one of those very public-facing departments that gets a lot of kudos for all the activities and special events that we have that a lot of our neighboring entities don't. The special programs, the reduction there, we had upped that based upon when the Crawfish Festival stopped, when the company let us know that they were not going to continue on their contract. We took the $16,000 that was planned to be utilized for the crawfish. Do I have the wrong page number?
Page.
I was just thinking about that. I heard the pages going. I'm like, I think I copied this slide and didn't change the page number.
136.
It's on 136. I'll give you time to go from 109 to 136 because I had it wrong. I'll talk slower. We took that $16,000 to plan, we put it in special programs in the current budget year with the anticipation that we would try to figure out what we wanted to do to kind of replace that. One of the ways that replaces, we beefed up our concerts. They're not only on the commons, but they're also in the parks. And so you can see the 5 pictures here is the lineup for this upcoming summer. I put the web address on there so you can see what dates and what location. But as I was reading through that, there are some outstanding concerts and acts coming to town this year. Get an opportunity, go outside, listen to some great music and enjoy. These are very well, so you see the increase in the concerts on the Commons line. Ross, help me out here. How many concerts are actually at the Commons?
I think we have three, and two of them are lunchtime. Lunchtime concert series that started last summer. It was really popular. It really appealed to a different group. Really trying to pull people into the commons. And we also pulled in families, kids, and continue to come up with new things like that.
I'm pretty sure though that this is the right page for parks maintenance. I said, if I'm wrong, it's Matt's fault. He had nothing to do with my presentation, but I'm blaming him. See what happens when you come to me. So there are a couple items that are happening here beyond just the maintenance of all our parks, and parks look wonderful and people talk about it. And our maintenance staff, they take pride. They're assigned to a park and they take pride in the park. It's their park and their park, and they do a great job of maintaining it. So a couple of the items that you'll see changes here. The first one, the bottom there, the contracted R&M systems. We need to replace a primary storm drain line that's in Ibach Park. And so that'll be paid for out of the cost to replace storm drain line. The utility city parks, and this pays for, you know, the water in our parks. It pays for the electricity. So the top picture there is an aerial of community park. You know, all the lighting that happens there, that's paid for on this line. The reason for the decrease is we trued up that line. Went back and looked at what the trends were. In the current year, we looked at what the budget was prior, the rate increase on top of that, so that's why it went up. But we looked at the trends the last couple of years and said, well, it's really lower. So even with those rate increases, we're not using as much of our utility rates. So that's the decrease there is a truing up trends in that line item. On the police side, so the consultants line is going to zero. It doesn't mean that police doesn't have any consultant needs. The current year budget, so if you remember, the mental health response team, we had a grant that covered not only our expenses for a year, but it covered Tigard's, covered Sherwood's, and it covered some overtime for training for the MHRT. So we had budgeted the payments for Tigard and Sherwood under that grant out of that line into consultants line. So when we were paying the county on their behalf, it was coming out of that line. Now that grant's gone away, no longer paying. Our whole line is just in contract services for our share of the charge. What's happening is you should see the decrease in the consultant. We're not covering the city share. The contract services line you see is going down. I thought I would never see this in my career. WACA, so the Washington County Communications, Consolidated Communications Agency. It's like I had it in my head, I'm going, I know what this is. That's who we have a contract with them to provide dispatch service. So we pay, there's a black box calculation of how much we have to pay for our share of the dispatch services. We are actually seeing a 4.2% decrease in our WACA fees. We are the only entity that is seeing a decrease this year. I can't remember what their reasoning was. I wasn't going to argue it. So those will continue to go back up, but that line item is going down this year because of WACA. And I got to say, some years when we've seen double-digit percent increases, again, I never thought I would see it. I'd like to give you credit, Chief, but it's not because you're talking less on the radio. We took his radio away, so now we don't use much airtime. So the last general fund division I'm going to talk about is our maintenance services budget. So you'll see the drop box hauling line going up. So Bulky Waste Day, which is a very popular event, Metro used to pay for the basically the trash that got brought, they would just cover the cost of that. That's no longer happening. So we determined that it was important to still have bulky waste day. And so our share, or the cost to provide, take the stuff we collect into Metro is included in that line item. So we'll still have a bulky waste day, it's just now we're paying a portion of that that we didn't have to pay for. And then down in the contracted R&M building and the systems line, you see it 0 to 9,000. It's an error. My part, when I entered change into their budget, it actually should be up on that line. And so it really doesn't go from 0 to 9. 9,000 should have been up in the building, the contract R&M building line, and that's based upon some HVAC costs. It's going to be more expensive than we initially anticipated for next year. That got added during the budget process, and I just picked the wrong line item. But what's involved in that line is the HVAC service and repairs have increased significantly. So any of our systems that we're having repaired or replaced is now costing us more. And then we're also seeing an increased cost of the fire alarm and backflow testing of all our buildings that paid for out of that line. And we've seen a significant that cost. So that is the general fund. I've been talking at you for a while. Unless you guys want me to power through, I was contemplating maybe taking a short couple-minute break. I'll leave it up to the chair and maybe if you want to take a quick break or just keep it.
Yeah. Everyone all right?
Okay. You just take a drink of water. That's
Oh, it was for you.
it's all about me. But I also know that you would probably like to let us continue talking. The more I talk, the quicker we get out of here. Is that what I hear? Let's get on to the building fund. So on the revenue side, you're seeing increases in all the bottom lines here, and that's the development. Primarily Sunrise, they're pulling more permits, they're paying more fees. We're seeing more activity for them, and so those line items are increasing. On the school side, that admin fee for the school construction excise tax. So the school districts have a construction excise tax that the developer has to pay. We collect that. We remit it to the school district, but we can keep 5% for administrative costs. These are primarily, this one's primarily the Sherwood School District. Almost all, if not all that property up there is in the Sherwood School District. I didn't see any significant changes in the expenditure side. Continuing to provide the service they provide. The costs are going up to normal type costs, being a little busier expenditure side, or because of the revenue we develop. Hey, got one more fund out of the way. So they're going to go into the parks utility and the parks projects funds. In the parks utility fee, I had some question about this as well. So this was a fee that was adopted by the council in December of 2020 to fund the operation and maintenance of our park system. We had a lot of deferred maintenance needed. Council adopted a $5 fee basically per account. So a commercial account, utility account pays the same as a residential. It's a $5 flat fee for each person. We also have the sidewalk street tree on the road utility side. It's also a flat fee like that. So it's based upon the same. It brings in about $650,000 a year, and that's then utilized for deferred maintenance, some operations part, and Councilor Pratt, President Pratt, talked about the funding of replacement in the parks. This is one funding source that can potentially some of that funding replacement as well. That's why we have not created the equipment replacement. We have some funding here, bond, and then, but I agree that looking somewhere down the road, replacement is something we should.
Yes, I remember correctly, it's a small percentage, but it's something.
It does not meet our needs, no, you're correct. So the items that are budgeted this upcoming year include some signage updates to the park system. So we need to update our signs. Boat ramp, so we're doing the Highway 99 boat or trail. There's a boat ramp component of that that's being paid for out of this fund. There's some work in Little Woodrose Nature Park that is funded out of the utility fund in the upcoming year. And some work out of the Kia Cuts Bridge that will be happening. All funded, this park utility fund. If you notice, the expenditures are higher than the 650,000. That's again how we built up. We didn't spend it all last year. We built up knowing that we had some high expenditures. We're also looking to hire a consultant out of this fund to do an evaluation of our existing facilities and buildings in our parks and determining what that strategy would be for those, whatever work's needed. Parks Project Fund, the revenue side, page 79, the expenditure side is page 147. This is where we brought in our money from our bond sale. So we brought in 17 million. We are spending some this year, so that's why our beginning fund balance is up for 15.5 million. And we're budgeting because we have $15 million sitting around it, and we are spending some of it. But we have idle funds. We're bringing about 440,000 millimeters of interest. That potentially that 5% interest rate, and some other changes that could even go higher. We brought in extra money on the premium of the bond sale, and now we're investing that interest towards projects. What projects are we looking at next year? The Vets Plaza construction. We're planning on that happening in this upcoming fiscal year. We're improving the lighting out at the sports fields at Tualatin Community Park. We're designing, we bought this property, there's a potential new access point to the Tualatin River, so we'll start on the design of what that might look like. We have several playground equipment replacement projects going on in the upcoming year. Budget also includes a project manager. Obviously, we're doing a lot of these big projects. We have a lot of projects. That's a lot of work for Rich, who's not here, but Ross and Rich and their staff. So we've added to the budget a project manager position, which is one of two positions that are being funded in the upcoming year. The other is an additional sergeant in the police department. But we're bringing on a project manager to help manage these projects. Any questions on parks? Okay, then let's go on to utilities. So as I mentioned, I'm not going to go into the revenue side, so utility funds, but it's the rate revenues, the increases and the changes in sewer and stormwater based upon the accounting change. On the expenditure side in the water fund, a couple of the items you see here, the water purchase for Tualatin, that's our contract with City of Portland to buy our water, turn around and sell. So that's the line item there, and the increase is based upon rate increases. Portland is charging us for the purchase of water. We are also going through a significant change in the contract process there, and that's going to give us some savings, some changes, some things that would have been higher that won't be, and just some of the contractual pieces that will be beneficial to us. So I know Nick Westendorf has been a kind of our point person with that project and with all the other wholesalers, and I think we're going to get to a better place. We're also seeing Tualatin Valley Water District as one of the biggest wholesale users. They're part of that Willamette Water Project. So in the next few years or years down the road, they're going to pull out of buying water through Portland. And gets allocated. Would have gotten all allocated to all the wholesalers. So that's part of the negotiations as well. Portland taking on part of that. So just being completely passed to the wholesalers, we would have seen significant rate increase. In the membership dues line, we are members of the Willamette River Water Coalition, or the WRWC, and the membership rate this next year. In the network online, so there is a where I'm not pointing out significant increases, but you'll also see in a line item, you'll also see a carryover later. See, we're doing a significant SCADA. You have this written down because for whatever reason, I've been talking about SCADA for years, and I always want to forget what that means. So it is the supervisory control and data acquisition, which monitors all our important parts of our water system. Have an alarm go off, staff will get that through the SCADA system, and we can respond quickly. And there's a lot of other data management that happens through the SCADA system. We're going through a complete or a significant upgrade to SCADA in this year. Part of that is the network online. When that's all upgraded, there's some additional networking costs that are going to go along with it. On a monthly basis. That's built into this as well. So that's what's built into the increases. There was questions about special programs. You'll see this also in the sewer operating fund. We're setting aside $40,000 in water. We're setting aside $40,000 in sewer. We're looking to develop a utility billing assistance program for low-income households. We haven't identified the whole process yet. That's something we talked to council about whether we should get on the path of doing. They said, yes, we want to look at that. We'll be putting together a program. We don't know what that impact is really going to be yet. We're going to talk to Community Action, who does a lot of energy assistance, and does some other, see what assistance they provide on that side in Tualatin, help us on the utility side. So because we have not put together the program yet, process, we're setting aside $40,000 in each fund to manage that, and then in future years we'll adjust accordingly. But we're excited to put together something that a lot of them, honestly, and this is just, my assumption, a lot of them are making decisions. They want to keep their water on so that we can pay the water bill. We can offer assistance. Commentary there, if you will, but that's set aside in both those budgets, put together this program. You see a significant increase, yes, in the contracted R&M systems. This is because our control valve, so every 5 years, we change out all the rubber components and we have 36 control valves in our water system. So every 5 years, we change out the rubber components. We also have a consultant that comes in that inspects, cleans, and recalibrates those valves. And if there's other pieces they see that need to be replaced, we'll replace them as well. So that's what the major increase in this line item is. It's 5-year time for us to work on our control valves. Onto the sewer fund. I thought maybe I didn't change the page numbers. If they're the wrong page numbers, it's not because I didn't change them from the last slide. This should be on page 169 and 170. And we've got the utility billing assistance program. We've got in our R&M systems line, we've got some lateral repairs in the sewer system that we increased that line item a little bit. We are decreasing some miscellaneous consultant needs, but part of an ad package this year was for some summer intern help for the sewer, storm, and road crew. And so we'll be hiring an intern through an outside agency to help those crews during the summer months. So you'll see that in sewer, stormwater, and the road operating budgets. We've got some consultant line items, or consultant dollars to pay for the summer intern program. Very helpful to the crews during the summer months. And then the clean water services, again, that user charges CWS goes to zero because we're no longer paying their share out of this line item. Stormwater operating, again, we have that CWS impact, clean water services. Got the intern amount in there. In the contract R&M, so our street sweeping contract is paid for half out of stormwater and half out of road. So the half of the newer contract, so that's the increase in that, the most part of that increase in that line item is we're seeing increases in our street sweeping contract. Fairly significant. So that's in this line, and we'll also see that when we get to the road operating fund. See the sweeping expense. And then the grounds and landscaping, you'll see a slight increase there. The upper picture there is one of our stormwater facilities, and so we do the maintenance of our stormwater facilities out of this line item. Grounds and landscaping, stormwater. Out on the roads, we know they're good quality, so if we get out there, we know we'll do well. So our road utility fee is for our pavement maintenance program. And this, you'll see every year you'll see the expenditures go up and down. And it's based upon the roads that we need to apply the right treatment for the right road at the right time. So we look at which roads need to be either crack sealed, slurry sealed, and what's the other one, right road? Overlays, thank you. So the mapping up there hopefully comes across. The yellow is the slurry seal areas that we're doing in the upcoming year. Blue is where overlay will occur. Green areas, crack seal. The overlay will happen out on Ibach between Grahams Ferry and 108th, and then on Avery between Boones Ferry and Martinez. Slurry sealing out on Hazelbrook, Oakwheel, Polina, 102nd, 103rd, Ports, Killarney Lane, and Killarney Port. And then we're crack sealing out on Teton, 118th, Miscellany, and Herman. So there's a lot of activity that'll be happening this year like they do every year. But those are the areas that, and so you see a decrease in that line item because it's what we're doing is going to cost us less, but we do, that's one of those funds too that we build up reserves in some years and lower cost years. So we know we've got some higher that we need to do, and then we have the reserves to pay for that. Another item, so we've been using a program called Street Saver. And our crews go out and they look at the streets, and we have an engineering firm that helps us look at the street, put all this data into a program called Street Saver. It identifies what our pavement condition index is, what we would need to get things up to a particular level. Because it's a known thing that you put a couple dollars worth of maintenance into a road at the right times, that it maintains your streets last longer, and you're not making a major rebuild. What you see in a lot of other cities is they don't have this pavement maintenance program. So they're out on the far side of this graph, where now it's costing them a lot more money to completely rebuild a road, heavier maintenance because they've not been maintained long term. But we are looking to hire a consultant in the next year, which is built into the budget, to help us do a more in-depth analysis of our roads, what our PCIs are, what it needs to be, and then a financing plan for that program going forward. So we have some consultant dollars built in this next year for that. And these are actually two of our streets, pictures of our streets. You can see the different conditions, but most of ours were up in that very good range. The Transportation Projects Fund, we are winding down the bond projects. We are actually in the last year, probably maybe go into one more year-ish, potentially. But we're starting to spend those last amounts. So you see less dollars than previous years because we've done a lot of projects. But we do have two big projects two of the bigger projects that are programmed in is the Martinez area between Boones Ferry and Fred Meyer intersection there and on upwards to I-5. And then out on Highway 99 in the Pony Ridge neighborhood, putting some sidewalks along Highway 99 there, because I've never been out there watching anybody try to bicycle and walk through there. It's a very dangerous situation. So we're going to put some sidewalks in there and make that a safer travel. I did have a question about the project mentioning Boone's Ferry and Martinazzi and that they are parallel, but in there it mentions that it's gonna, that intersection, we're gonna do some improvements. Also, if you see on this slide here, we're actually starting, so we're gonna do some improvements of the buffered bike lanes out on Boone's Ferry Road. So it does extend where Martinazzi crosses it down over by our city offices and our library. Not only down Boone's Ferry, but it extends to that part of Boone's Ferry as well. So that's why if you look at the goal on, because on page 190, it talks about Martinazzi and Boone's Ferry. That's where it is of that intersection going forward. That, I got through all the funds, even without a break. And you guys still, no one's, I applaud you, no one fell asleep. So at this point, Madam Chair, would be where we take any public comments. Don't know if we have anybody out on Zoom land, so to speak, of. You want to make any public comment? So I did receive one written public comment from Marissa Holberg. For- The record. Oh, I'll get you a copy. Okay. As I read this, the request is for the committee to consider creating a park asset replacement fund. As we mentioned at the last meeting, to do so, the monies would come from the general fund. If the committee chooses to put aside any money to fund a program, and the flip side of that is you would have to find a spot in the general fund to reduce the general fund to pay for this. Because the general fund, especially our ongoing revenues, are all programmed into funds for the budget I presented to you this evening. Or the committee's prerogative and their purview if to make any reductions or additions to any line items in the budget. In this case, we would need to have a corresponding decrease because that's the only place funding is available. What I mentioned earlier in the meeting, that one of the things I did not mention the last meeting, one of the other potential funding sources for something replacements in the future is the Parks Utility Fund. As Council President Pratt mentioned, there are a lot of needs in our park system. That is a funding source that is out there right now. It's going to be replaced. So at that, dialogue or any comments. Yes and no. If we're applying for a grant, and it has a matching requirement, we have to identify what's coming. It might be looked favorably, but either way, when we apply, we have to identify whether it's coming from other funding sources or whether we have this set aside. They're gonna be looking at whether we provide a match. Counselor Reyes. The $400,000 is a portion of our liquor taxes, and that is just programmed. So there's no restrictions on it from the state. So we just have it programmed into as one of our revenue sources in our general fund. So it pays for general fund operations. We don't have it identified that this 400,000 is paying for this in the police department and this in our parks or this. Our revenues, we have very few revenues that are identified for a particular purpose, especially in the general fund. Most all our funding sources in the general fund are not restricted funds. Pay for all the budgets and all the things that are funded out of the general fund. If you chose to do that, you would have to be reducing a general fund expenditure somewhere else. We consider that 400,000 as ongoing revenue that pays for our ongoing expenditures that are already programmed. We've already programmed that ongoing revenue into our expenditures. So if we were to take anything like that, we would have to find a way to reduce something else.
Just considering this, what dollar amount?
That would be something that we would have to analyze, which makes it hard as we sit here today to start a program like this because we don't have the plan. I really wouldn't be able to be higher, but I wouldn't be able to really.
Yeah. The Parks Department's done a lot, yeah, it's hard tonight, but I know the Parks Department's done a lot of analysis of the condition of all the assets in the last couple of years, so I mean, it's not so fair. Yeah, it's there, or there's a lot of the foundation to find those numbers, and then I would assume like any new, like say playground equipment going in, there's gotta be a known lifespan of that, whether it's maybe 15 or 20 years. Just like IBOC, when was that all done? And then, but the reason I suggested it is just like the vehicles, we know those, to me, it's like your house or your water heater or whatever, it's only gonna last so long. So why aren't we setting money aside, or like condo associations do for new roofs, knowing, we know that expense is coming. So why wouldn't we set aside money every year? So when that year comes, if we happen to be in a bad year, it's not like, let's do that. We need for something else.
Counselor Gonzalez, Counselor Hilliard.
It'd be like a
Were to feed. Adding something like this to it is going to be an ongoing, because you have to add something. We would have to look at that to determine, it wouldn't just be, we couldn't continue to fund that as an ongoing, so one time. We could seed something using some one time, but we have. And that kind of factors into our ongoing revenue and ongoing expenditure. We are starting this year with a negative alignment of our ongoing. We know that we'll get back to, part of that is some revenues that I mentioned going down, but to do something like this on an ongoing basis would also need to look at that picture and whatever that amount is carried forward. My recommendation would be, if this is something that we don't add it to the current year budget, because where we're at, I mean, it gets purview of the committee if they want to make these trade-offs, but would be something that can be discussed in the future to see if it's something that can be considered. I agree that there's a need. We also have a lot of other needs, so balancing and then having that conversation. Did I answer your question? Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Along those lines, I'm wondering about we put the title funds in high bearing 5% interest. Is that, are those funds not eligible to be moved into this particular category? I mean, I hear everything you're saying, and I think if we don't start, at some point, we're never going to start. So I guess I'm concerned about state of affairs in the parks. Them having a plan, so.
We cannot take bond dollars and put it into something.
But the interest you can.
So there are, just the
I'm
other side,
very
I'll
sure
say.
that interest is good.
On that, but the other side is we have a lot of other parks needs that the bond's paying for.
Right.
That-
and this would stay in the park.
Yeah, I'd have to look at our bond, what we promised the voters. I know that Parks is chomping at the bit for some other projects
Well, I
that
get
fall
that.
into that
I
guideline.
get
so.
that, and, we as sponsors also make a commitment to our community to make sure. A lot of us heard that, is that we want some sort of infrastructure put in place to make sure.
Joe, did you have a question? And then Councilor Reyes.
Yeah, so there's a lot of discussion about how, my question is, why? Is this a better idea than what we're already doing? Because we're already doing it.
We have other needs, other replacement needs in the parks that are not fully covered by, so when they did an analysis of the park system, it's multi-million dollars of needs. We are funding parts of it through the park's utility fee. That's a portion. Parks bond is paying for some other of the fees and some other things, part of that. But there are a long list of needs in the parks of replacement and upkeep. That's what's driving this discussion.
Things that aren't getting done.
Not to the level, either they're not or not to the levels that.
How do you do that? Even if you put together separate line items, how do you do that without increasing the budget?
Well, and that's,
So we're talking about doing this to increase the budget.
it would either be, yeah, if we're increasing for this, we'd have to decrease somewhere else because the budget's balanced right now. And if you're increasing anything in the general fund budget, you have to decrease somewhere else. One-time things are a lot easier because we have one-time revenues, but this particular item would be an ongoing source, and I can't recommend putting some one-time to create something that's going to be an ongoing source. If there is. My recommendation, do not include it in the 23-24 budget. Because of the analysis that would need to be done and determine, can it be done on an ongoing basis? What it would look like? How much would it be? I mean, there's a lot of factors that would go into what this might look like. If the committee as a whole said, no, we want this started, then I need something, I need a reduction from the committee to offset.
If we put this off to next year, could we, I guess, recommend that it be put in the budget next year, even though the committee will be somewhat different next year? Can we get some kind of assurance that this will be looked at?
We could,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
Committee makeup.
I think we could look at it to what extent or where, how long and whether we'd be ready. I mean, we could put it into the work plan. But there's a lot of work to it. Well, saying that, yes, I could have it come back in 24, 25, it was my hesitancy a little bit, but a lot of things that are going on. But yes, I could say that we could start to look at it.
Can I just say one comment to Joseph? Like, when they did the study of the parks assets, there was so much deferred maintenance, and to me, it was an embarrassment, and it's not something I want to see repeated with our city. I think it's something we can improve on.
I'm willing to support looking at it and coming up with a plan, not to just write a blank check and say, let's
Right.
do it.
Right. Yeah.
Because I don't know what the.
Yeah, no, it needs to
be. Or the numbers. Talking about that there's a need, but I don't know what it is.
I think I said John, then Counselor Sacco.
How did the vehicle replacement come? There.
No, we started with utility funds. And that was only for a few years. We didn't get to the general fund till last year. And we looked at, part of that was because we had an ongoing amount of expenditures every year coming out of the general fund for vehicles. And so part of that offset of the general fund contribution was stuff that was significant costs that were an ongoing piece anyway. So it got moved in there, we were able to backfill for that. But we went just utility funds for a few years because of having to fund it out of the general fund on an ongoing basis. Sacco. Elizabeth. I was trying to remember who I called on.
That seems to be the formula that hasn't.
Any other questions or discussion? So what I'm hearing, I believe, unless there's a motion to adjust the budget for this, what I'm hearing is we want to look at what this might look like in the upcoming year and come and have those discussions and see what this might look like. And then there's a potential for the
So let me just see if I get this straight. Do an analysis of a parks asset replacement fund. That,
Well, we're dealing with this deferred maintenance, so we don't get in that same.
yeah, so a parks asset, like a replacement fund that, and so the analysis would be, how do you seed it? Where would that come from? And how do you contribute to it ongoing? And where would that come from? And how you would calculate that?
And what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, I mean, I hear John saying that unless you have a specific proposal of where to cut, for that ongoing piece, that it's probably, it's not recommended to do it this right now. But we can look at it over the coming year and be back with something at the budget committee meeting potentially, or have conversations with council about it during the year.
If we did it this year, we still have to do analysis.
For sure.
Knowing what goes into making the budget. Based
So we're at the end of May.
Yes, it had an engineer.
I would have to have an amount, so, I mean, it would, I thought if someone were making a motion, the amount wouldn't be based on any kind of full analysis, it'd be an amount, and then I'd be asking for a reduction.
I mean, honestly, part of the reason for the discussion about the utility fee, the $5 utility fee, was this very thing, and was, how do you maintain our assets ongoing? And it just, the deferred was so big that it will take a long time to get to all the deferred stuff. But, you know, the utility fee, that structure was really kind of set up and is ideal for this very type of thing. But the $5,
We're so in the hole, and then
yeah.
we're adding new parks, and that's gonna add to the.
The STC money goes for that,
No,
Parks
for
SCD
long
fee.
term.
but when you build out your parks, STC fees are spent for new parks.
Yeah, I know it's spent for new parks, but then you have to maintain the new
Right.
park.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll get there
And
next.
we'll
year.
get
No,
there,
I agree
so-
that it's a big jump to do this at the
You
end of
know,
May
that's
for
what
a budget that needs to be adopted. Yeah, no, it makes sense to do the analysis.
Do we need somebody to move to make a motion to implement an analysis?
No,
Or
I
we're
think
just gonna
we,
do it?
no, I've gotten direction, I've heard enough direction to do it. The only motion that would need to happen is if someone making a motion to adjust the budget. I'm not hearing a motion to adjust the budget. Okay, so a little time check. It's 10 after 8. Meeting was scheduled till 8. 2 items left on. the agenda. One is we do have some, or one is if there's any other questions. I do have some amendments, or Matt has some amendments we'll talk about here in a second, and then would be consideration of approval of the budget. My guess is that everybody would like to just power through and get through those couple items and not have to come back tomorrow night. Okay. That, are there any other questions about the budget as a whole before we get into those amendments
or
Not hearing any, I'm gonna go ahead and pass out.
Don't pass out.
Rushing around this afternoon, all of a sudden I felt this like, little bit of a pain here, just like a muscular pain. My first thought is, uh-oh, what are they gonna do? And I was gonna go into Matt's office. No, here's my presentation, but, no, it was just, so Matt's gonna walk through the amendment that we have on. You're asking me. In front of. Matt, you're on, my friend.
wait until. First Amendment is, in the general fund, two items related to the climate action plan. First one is some community engagement that is being pushed into 23-24. It was originally budgeted in the current year. And then the other item is 62,000 for consultants, also related to the community. Has not been expended in the current year.
The climate action plan?
Yeah.
Good.
So, yeah, both of those items were related to the climate. The next item is workers' comp and climate tax in the police and information services budget. So the way we put our budget together, we budget workers' comp and climate tax in individual departments in the general fund that is moved over into the non-departmental cost center. There were some personnel adjustments made after we did our main budget. Those remain costs did not. $3,230 in police and $35 in information. This next item is a little bit harder to explain. It's paid leave Oregon. So you'll notice that there isn't an offsetting here. The reason for that is these items were originally included in our budget. They just didn't make it to the printed document. And so they were budgeted, they're reflected in our ending fund balance. It's just the software that gets moved over from our budgeting software did not have those line items, so they didn't print. Just in those two cost centers, in the administration.
It's just messing with you.
Yeah, I know.
All we're asking is that those budgets get, because the proposed budget you have in front of you approved does not have.
Next item is reducing the budget, Parks and Recreation Cost Center. This is related to the River Trail Extension Project under 99. We put the budget together, we had, I think there was a delay in the design work. And so we put the total project cost into 23-24 in our proposed budget. That work has now started up, and so some of that work is occurring in the current fiscal year. And so it's now reducing what we need to have carried over to 23-24 budget. That is all the items for the general fund. Moving on to the water operating fund, there was a $40,000 carryover request for the valve turning machine. I think that item has been ordered, but we're not expecting to receive it, or it's about to be ordered. We're not expecting to receive it until next fiscal year, so that would be current year. And then the $430,000 in fund projects that is related to the SCADA, and I'm not going to remember the acronym. The SCADA improvement project, similar to the valve turning machine, that item has been ordered. There's some supply chain delays. The last two items are similar, where we have originally expected the work to be completed. First item is in the sewer operating fund. It's the Martinazzi trunk upsize project. This one has a reimbursement from Clean Water Services. They that project. So $99,000 increase in the revenue, your CWS reimbursement, 100,000 project. That's actually next fiscal. And the last item is a carryover of 100,000 for the transportation system plan update. That's also work that was originally expected to be completed this fiscal year. Gonna happen. That's all. Any questions for Don?
And also, any questions for Matt? With that, those are the amendments. You've heard me talk about the budget itself. At this point, if you so choose, I would more than happy to entertain a motion for approving the budget. And this is the motion that would need to be made, because you not only do the budget, you're approving, but the budget, you're approving our tax rate, and then how much we need to levy for repayment of bonds. So that's total.
Second.
You have to read it.
Read it.
Thousand of the assessed value. And amount of $4,074,595 for payment of general obligation.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
Not done yet. Because we also have Walton Development Commission, which is easier because I have no amendment.
I move to approve the fiscal year 2020.
All in favor?
I guess that-
Or second? Yeah.
You get that, Nicole? Now.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? All right.
Thank you. Appreciate all your hard work. I know I got you out here 20 minutes after normal. This is, I think, the longest budget committee member I've had. Meeting I've had, because I just talked. So, thank you.
Can you tell us why the state budget isn't transparent? Why did you have to take it?
Well, the marijuana money, because the dispensary revenues are confidential information.